Hello and welcome to Data Planet. I'm Emma Davis, and our guest today is Cory Treffiletti, Chief Marketing and Digital Officer at Rembrandt. Welcome to the show, Cory.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start with some context. What is Rembrandt?
So Rembrandt's a company that's been around for a couple of years. And what we do is we focus on creating new types of video advertising experiences. Specifically, there's a couple things that we do right now. We use AI to create virtual product placement and virtual out-of-home insertions inside of professional television content.
Okay.
So that basically puts your ads and your brand inside the content. And on the other side of our offering, we have a tool called Spaceback, which actually takes social content and turns it into ads that can be used in the interruptive commercial slots inside of that same television content. So we also take your content and put it inside the ads.
That's super cool and mind-blowing. And so at this point, none of that is programmatic yet. All of that is media buy, or is the social part is
The
programmatic?
social part is indeed programmatic. That's actually
Okay.
really simple AI creative automation where you can take those social posts and turn it into a CTV ad or display ad in a couple of seconds and then push them to your programmatic seat. The
Oh,
virtual and social stuff, we're still working on the programmatic side.
yeah, all right. That feels a little bit sci-fi, so I mean, no points lost for not being there yet, but
I appreciate it.
but I'm excited about that. That's really cool. Um, so as the chief marketing and digital officer, who are you trying to reach? Who are the actual customers of each of those two offerings? Let's start with the sort of the insertion,
The
the
virtual,
dynamic, the virtual insertion
yeah.
product first.
Well, the audience is surprisingly similar across both. We are
Okay.
typically starting with people who are advertising in video. So the video investment teams at the agencies or the brands who are looking to reach their audiences in video.
Hmm.
With the virtual placements, that software, we tend to actually sell that to the publishing side. So the people who own the content, and that enables them to go talk to the video investment teams. We do also have a marketplace for brands that want to work with us to be introduced into that content. So we do enable that too.
Hmm.
But that's essentially how that side of the business works. Um, the Spaceback stuff, the social content ads that are powered by that platform, that we tend to sell directly to the brands and the agencies. Anybody doing programmatic, anybody doing a video investment, really anybody even doing social media. So that has a little bit more flexibility because it's used by so many different parts of the overall media buying continuum.
Yeah. So are there sort of minimums to participate in either of those? When you talk about, the content publishers, I'm imagining big studios, but
Right.
is there you must be at least this large or doing this much anything to participate in either of those offerings?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay.
Pretty much any kind of budget or size can work. It just depends on the scale of the show or the overall impressions that you're going to be running with the social content ads from Spaceback. The bottom line for all of it, and the reason why when you ask the question like, what do we do?
Hmm.
The reason why it all kind of ties together is because we identified a few years ago that in video advertising, there's really only a couple ways to get your brand out there, and if you're like me, which I think you are, you try to skip every
We'll
ad
find
as
out.
quickly as possible,
Oh, yeah.
right? So whenever you see an ad and you have the opportunity to skip it, you do. So that signal is pretty much universal from the entire audience. Now, some publishers have figured out that they can force you to watch the ads and you kind of are stuck with them. But
Hmm.
even in a streaming environment, there are fewer ads. So it's just less to work with there. And
Hmm.
the natural inclination for the audience is to skip it. So what we did is we focused on not necessarily the size of the advertiser or even the process per se, but giving these new experiences. And so one is unskippable, right? You're inside the content and the size of the buy just depends on the size of the reach for the show that you want to be involved in because we can put a placement in and then take it back out.
Whoa.
So that's pretty easy. And on the other side of things, even though those social content ads, those space back ads, they show up in a placement that can be skipped, the fact that they're using social content, they tend to not be skipped. They tend to perform significantly better than some sort of interactive, standard, video ad because people get sick and tired of seeing those things. Whereas these are new, they're fresh, and you can do almost unlimited of them. So that's the fundamental thing. It's not about the size of the process. It's about these new types of experiences.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, well, so with the space back offering, can you then do whatever you want with the video content that you generate?
Yeah, you can take it and run it in pretty much any DSP seat you're working with. You could put it somewhere else if you want to. I don't know why you'd want to. You really want to run it where there's a programmatic slot to run that ad, but
Yeah.
it's up to you. You can basically push it to any other DSP platform and just run it.
Awesome. That's great. Because one of the things we're finding, especially on the bigger ad networks, is that they crave diversity and
Yeah.
like creative diversity, as well as just having fresh content. So that's, from the user side, obviously we get bored looking at the same thing over and over again.
Right.
The ad networks have figured that out and they actually reward people who introduce, here's something new, here's something different. And, we're not seeing anymore, oh, there's this one champion and you just sort of split test one versus the other. In order to play the ad networks game, you kind of have to be producing fresh content regularly. And so that it sounds like that makes it that much easier for people to do that with stuff that they've already created.
Yeah. I mean, you already probably invested in the social media that you're running. So all those organic posts that you do, maybe you're using creators and influencers for it. Maybe you're running B-roll. Maybe you've just shot some other content that you run there. But you can now repurpose that. You can basically amplify it into a TV environment. You can augment whatever your TV campaigns are going to be. So you might have your sort of pillar creative that you run, but you
Mhm.
could run 50 other pieces of creative as well and be very, very fresh and have no wear out whatsoever, because to create the creative doesn't cost anything. It's actually just baked into the CPM when you run the media. So essentially it's like having free creative at your disposal and you can create this stuff in seconds.
That is so cool. That's awesome. Um, Cory, I'd love to talk a little bit more about you. So, in preparing for this show, I was looking into your history and your work experience. So, you've been a co-founder at multiple companies. You've had some huge roles in marketing at Cisco and Oracle. Um, you're in advisory and board roles, experiences in both of those. You've had multiple exits. You clearly have a passion and aptitude for growing businesses
Yeah.
from startups to these, huge global brands. Um, and you're a self-proclaimed data-driven storyteller. I don't know if that is current, what you have on your LinkedIn profile, but that's what's there right now. So, my question is, what are some common threads for successful data-driven marketing, whether you're at that early stage startup or running marketing for some of the biggest brands in the world?
It's a hard question. I think,
Why, thank you.
well, yeah, you're welcome. I would say the two things to it. And it's interesting because my two answers to that are going to be all about creative and about reinvention.
Mhm,
So I do call myself a data-driven storyteller, which is I like to tell stories, and I think stories come from a creative part of your brain. The data-driven component it's applied when you basically realize that no matter what idea you come up with, it can be tested and adjusted, and then you can run it in different places and see what works and what doesn't. So in the older days of doing storytelling, you would spend a lot of time to try and put together a concept and an idea and then figure out a way to go execute it across multiple platforms. And then you had to just wait and you had to give it time and sort of
and
lagging indicators to see if it actually performed,
yep, yep, hope
right?
for the
You
best.
don't have to do that anymore, especially when you look at all these AI tools that we have at our disposal to take an idea, take a story, turn it into a minimum viable product very, very quickly. Go
Mhm,
test that across different platforms. And then really you don't have to commit until you know it's working. And so I think being able to tap into that creative component of your brain where you can come up with ideas, and you should always be coming up with new ideas.
mhm,
You can look at a brand like a Cisco or Oracle, which a lot of people would probably say are pretty boring, staid brands, but we can go for really cool and sort of fun out of the box ideas. And
mhm,
then we would go test them. And then you're constantly reinventing them. Whatever ideas you're working with that are being successful right now are not going to work in 6 months. So you
mhm,
constantly take your team and you set them down and you say, look, how can we reinvent what we're doing to constantly be at the forefront of stuff? And that's why I like all these different types of advising and startups and all that kind of stuff, is because you're constantly challenging your brain in a way that you haven't challenged it before. And you
mhm.
don't give it a lot of time to rest, and you don't give it a lot of time to sit down and um, just get comfortable.
Or get too precious about any one thing. That was my
Yeah.
magnum opus. It's like, I mean, it was for that period of time, and now
It's,
we're on to another period.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can never be precious about anything because everything is going to falter at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, on that bright note, no. So with when you talk about data driven, uh, storytelling? What's the data that you're paying attention to understand how the story is going over or what you want to focus on next?
Yeah. So you kind of have to reinvent that too. So the way that I was taught was to look at basically leading indicators and lagging indicators and see if there's a correlation between the two.
Okay.
So for every campaign, every idea, you can come up with some sort of leading indicator, which is an early warning sign to basically say maybe that idea is working or it's not working. And that
Mhm.
gives you something to optimize early on in the funnel. And then you've got the lagging indicators, the stuff that you know is really the fundamental outcome you're trying to achieve, which could be a sale or customer acquisition or some other, actual impact metric for your business.
Mhm.
And what you try to do is run enough of a sample size so that the leading indicator has a direct correlation to the lagging indicator. So that as you start to test this idea or test iterations on that idea, the leading indicators give you enough to optimize from, and you have enough confidence to know that that optimization will affect the lagging indicator down the line. And that time zone, it could be 3 days, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months, but it gives you something to be able to work towards. So you're not just putting a campaign into market and hoping it's going to work once again for a quarter, and then you're stuck with something that did or didn't work too late in the game.
And with in those scenarios, so it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is similar to what we would do in paid digital in terms of looking at, okay, well, first we need the impressions. Like we need to make sure people are seeing this. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Now, based on our expectations, we should see about this click through rate. Okay, great. We're seeing that now clicks and then moving all the way through the funnel ultimately to revenue and then creating this feedback loop back to what did we spend in order to make that happen. So
Mhm.
in your roles and what you've been focused on, to what extent are you trying to optimize to a specific financial return versus just sort of a, you know, there's some positive feedback loop there that
Mm.
this didn't crash and burn, so
Yeah.
success. Like, how specific is that target?
Your model is the same model that you have used everywhere since, believe it or not, since 95 when we started doing this stuff. Everything is achievable to a business outcome.
Mhm.
It's kind of tied to an older question, which is like, do you believe in doing brand advertising or direct response advertising? I don't believe either one exists. I believe they're the
Okay.
same thing
Mhm.
because if you build a brand, it has a better impact on your back end direct response metrics. And there's no such thing as direct response anymore because there's very few people who click on anything anymore. I mean, if you think about what direct response advertising and marketing was supposed to be, it was when you called somebody and then they answered the phone and you actually got a customer, or they clicked on a banner, or they actually went to a store when they heard a radio ad. Nobody does any of that anymore. We are
Mhm.
training everybody to be agnostic and ignorant towards every form of communication towards them because they're inundated. So actually, you have to build a brand in order to be able to break through the clutter. So really, every brand element has to have a back end response metric. I think it's all the same thing.
Yeah. But it sounds like we're on the same page that you can go wrong focusing on either of them too much.
Oh
So
yeah,
like brand for the sake of brand, like
yeah,
congratulations, I guess, but,
yeah,
like, are you still
yeah.
a business? Are you still growing?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody remembers a sock puppet, but where's that company now?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, awesome. Um, well, Cory, this was a great conversation, short and sweet. Listeners, if you wanna find more information about Cory and Rembrandt, details are in the show notes. Otherwise, Cory, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Data Planet, and, yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Emma. I appreciate it.